Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Web3 podcast series powered by DigiChain Innovation. And tonight we have a very special guest with us, Sean White from XDC. He is responsible for building infrastructure and ecosystem and also doing the business development activities on XDC network here in Australia. Hi, Sean. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, Sharik. Thank you very much for having me along.
Thank you very much for your time. So basically, we'll be discussing Web3 in general. So let's talk about, how do you see Web3 ecosystem in Australia and what unique factors contribute to its growth?
Yeah, well, obviously, a lot of tonight's going to be focused on Australia and being the ecosystem development representative for XDC Network here. So, focusing on Australia, I'd probably say there's maybe 3 or 4 things which I would probably want to cover and give you a bit of a snapshot. I would say there are many Web3 ancillary services and producers in these 2 capital cities in Sydney and Melbourne in particular in Australia, with an array of sort of venture capitalist offices and business incubation options. So there's probably a bit of an innovation hub and accelerator sort of presence here in Australia, but mostly in those East Coast southern states. I'd probably say there's another factor of the growth is obviously, when we're looking at the contributions from research centers and academia. There's a handful of really fantastic universities here in Australia, thinking particularly of RMIT in Melbourne and University of New South Wales or University of Technology Sydney in those states that I mentioned just now. QUT and UQ and Griffith University in Queensland probably provide some good blockchain, especially some postgraduate courses. And then obviously there's a fair bit of community builds that go on, community grassroots sort of aspects, which is really important for the engagement on that soft education or the continuing education or the network opportunities through meetups or online forums. There's a fairly strong developer group, especially in Solidity and things like that. You'll probably find, obviously underpinning all of that is the government regulations and policy advisory, which the legislators churn through. If you asked, a ballpark of the whole industry, you'd probably get some varying degrees of satisfaction and dissatisfaction on that part. But I would say, obviously, government support and regulations of Web3 is obviously a fairly strong factor in all of that as well, Sharik.
So, what do you see as some of the most promising projects or sectors currently emerging in the Web3 space?
Well, again, in Australia, I would say some of the more exciting things, given that XDC is very much a trade finance focused chain, or at least that's our origin story is. I love what you guys have done when you turned your hand towards the digitalization or the digitization, at least, of trade documents, electronic bills of lading in particular. That's obviously a no-brainer, Sharik. I'm a big fan of what you and Sohaib do. So I can definitely feel as though we're on the edge of something quite amazing there, bringing that paperless trade in with the trade finance. I mean, we don't need to do the finance digitally at the moment, but we can start doing the documents digitally. That's a fantastic start. Moving on from that, sustainability and resources and environmental concerns are very much on the forefront of a lot of Australians' minds, and there is definitely some movement there when it comes to providing projects, or we're sort of going into that. And there is a colleague of mine who's doing a lot of work. I think it's actually based on one of the graph networks, one of those chains, but it's working on tokenizing water and letting the water sort of be managed a lot more sensibly and more with more traceability. And that's brings me to another point, I guess, is having the regulations in place or not in place has a significant effect on those sorts of infrastructure projects. Gaming is particularly big in Australia. There is one particular business that's doing fantastic called Immutable. And I believe financials, you can't really go anywhere in blockchain in Australia without tripping over someone doing something on the financial or payments space. That being said, again, it's sort of a regulatory area which is having some teething problems. But there is a couple of exchanges like, I'm going to forget this now, but Digital X is one, and Monochrome's another. They've got reserves in place with their Bitcoin ETFs. So some really prudent and methodical approaches to financials and management. And of course, tied in with financials, I guess, is staking as a service. There is at least a couple of strong ETH staking. I think Peer 2 is one of them. Some very sort of globally renowned ETH staking platforms as well. That's probably where I'd sum up where Australia's landscape is at the moment.
So, in your experience, Sean, because you'll be collaborating with all these businesses and developers here in Australia, so what major hurdles do you think these developers are facing in Australia?
There's definitely a little bit of regulatory sort of considerations that need to be made or to be factored in, and that has pushed a lot of projects and builds over the last 10 years overseas into regions which have, or jurisdictions that have a great deal more certainty. So, you know, there is a policy being released by Treasury, Australian Department of Treasury, and that's coming out of this summer, which should clarify and create a lot more certainty in the environment, especially when it comes to digital assets, stable coins, things of that nature. Finding an investment can be a tricky hurdle. It's sort of economically, you know, there's tech is sort of like a bit of a tough bind at the moment. So getting venture capital interest or seed capital, angel investors can still be a little tricky here in Australia. That being said, you know, it's not impossible. It's just a matter of doing your diligence and you know, being on the front foot with seeking out good investments. Public perception, you know, whether it's public service, government, or the average person on the street, there's still a little bit of problems, I guess, when it comes to acceptance of blockchain compared to the acceptance of sort of the incumbent of cloud. It's interesting because cloud does have a lot of cracks appearing at the moment with hacks and things like that, which technically a good solid infrastructure blockchain DLT will mitigate those sorts of risks. So maybe it's just a matter of what people are used to and comfortable with, and that goes to the public service as well. Private enterprise, you know, there are some movements towards from banks and some other sort of you know, entities using tokenization or traceability. The uptake's been a little slow, so there are some hurdles there, but there's always going to be the pioneers and the first movers. And maybe talent shortage is also a factor. You know, we can't dispute that we're only a nation of 27 million people, and per capita, we're probably doing okay. But you know, we are then also a very geographically disparately sort of populated place. So it's just as well developers don't mind, you know, not meeting on in person. They do like to work online. So if you can tap into that market and sort of work with that, then we can kind of mitigate some of the supply shortages in the workforce. But they're probably the main hurdles, I'd say, and it's probably not they probably don't read from a different script from different regions as well, to be quite frank.
So you mentioned about regulation. I was going to ask you about how XDC is addressing that. But before going into that, what's XDC's vision in general, and especially in this region,
Yeah.
Australia and New Zealand?
Yeah. Well, this whole Oceana region, with the South Pacific, going straight through, it's a massive trade channel. So we are definitely mindful of that, especially with XDC being originating from a very strongly trade finance focused blockchain. So part of the main thrust of what I do is to make sure that we impress upon Oceana that we're an infrastructure that can handle trade. So that's the underpinning of the vision. We are obviously a tokenization platform. We have securitization of stocks and treasury bonds and commodities like gold and all sorts of manner of things. So we're still very much desiring to have builders here who are tokenizing some form of commodity or experience for that matter. So for Australia and Oceana, we're focusing on growing the blockchain ecosystem to provide that infrastructure, whether it's private or public for that matter, for just, as an option or as an alternative to sort of cloud-based sorts of DLTs. I'm not too sure if there's much more else to say about our vision, but it's always evolving, Sharik. So,
Yep.
What we love to see is that creativity that comes from Australia and the South Pacific, that connection to land and that sort of ingenuity, which oftentimes characterizes, communities that have lived in isolation, whether it's New Zealand, Australia, or the Pacifics or Papua New Guinea, where we're very much, an inventive bunch of people. For that matter with PNG, they're an MLETR region as well. So love to get an export into Papua New Guinea using DigiChain's solutions there. But that's probably the vision I'd say that we have and that we're continually evolving.
Great. So coming back to those hurdles and issues we were discussing, so
Yep.
we know that scalability and regulation are some of the most pressing issues currently. So how is XDC network addressing these issues and supporting the growth of Web3 solutions in Australia?
Yeah. Okay. So being a delegated proof of stake, we obviously we've got a somewhat leaderless but certainly randomized consensus protocol, which becomes very energy efficient, but it also allows us to scale as we're something like a minimum of 2,000 transactions per second. Obviously, we have a hybrid network, which also allows us to then maybe allow coders and developers and builders to segment and compartmentalize their builds as well, which with sharding can probably bring that number up to 40 or 50,000 transactions per second. So that's sort of the range of our scalability. We're a layer one, obviously, an EVM compatible layer one. So, we aren't at the point in our life cycle of being 5 years old on our mainnet to really be too concerned about addressing scalability. There's only, I don't know, ballpark, couple of the crypto blockchain market is quite small at the moment, so we will scale ourselves as the need arises. It might have taken us a couple of years to do our protocol upgrade, but I imagine that the guys, mind you, which is going to be released next month, but I'm sure the protocol team have already started addressing the next upgrade. So on that level of scalability, I think that's where we're sitting. Regulation, things that are outside of our control as an infrastructure provider. Part of our role, or part of my role in particular, here in Australia is integrating with the Digital Economy Council of Australia and all their policy advisory and regulatory sort of talks and roundtables that go on during the year. I was invited to participate in the most recent one back in February, I think it was, or March. and there was a paper that came from that, which is advising government at the moment. So there's obviously some harmonization that's required. We want to have a global approach to regulations here in Australia, which sort of mirrors or at least sort of complements the leaders in other parts of the world, which have already a bit more far advanced with integrating Web3 into their societies. So we only ask that we meet that challenge, and part of my job is to make sure that we give our opinion, being a major global player, and obviously dealt with a lot of the other regulatory frameworks with the Monetary Authority of Singapore back in Singapore, obviously in the ADGM, the Abu Dhabi Global Markets. And so obviously we're very much a regulatory savvy and very much a compliant network, and anything I can do to kind of trickle some of that knowledge and wisdom into Australia in various ways, I'm only too happy to help out on that as well.
Yeah, those are some great insights. So, really impressive how XDC as a layer one network, it's provide that level of scalability. As this market is evolving, there's things are becoming more and more clear with time.
Well, and just to add to that, Sharik, what the viewer may not appreciate is, XDC Network was invited into the International Trade and Forfeiting Association back in 2020, which is basically an organization that looks after and promotes the international movement and policy decisions and organizations to do with anything to do with trade and lending and finance, which is sort of feeds into the World Trade Organization and things like that. So we're the only blockchain that's part of that level of global policy and harmonization of policy. So and saying that, we have worked in all various jurisdictions and regions, having to kind of deal with all sorts of compliance when it comes to paperless trade and the tokenization of the documents and things like that. So when we talk about blockchains which are savvy with regulations, XDC is not only a financially prudent, regulatory aware, but we're also very much a tokenization aware blockchain, and we're also compliant with the ISO 20022 payment messaging systems as well. So we are trying to we are covering pretty much everything to do with tokenization and payments, and obviously that comes through working with governments and regions and also their regulatory bodies.
With the rapid growth for Web3 in Australia, what potential do you see for new businesses and developers entering in this space, and what is XDC doing to help these businesses? And I want to club another question with that. If there are developers out there looking to get involved with XDC network, what resources and support are available to them?
Sure. All right. Well, Sharik, I guess what we ultimately offer is a clever and robust DLT infrastructure. At the end of the day, that is probably something that a lot of developers want to find. They want to find something that's reliable. They want to find something that has got good, that's built well, I guess, on a protocol level. We are very much committed to supporting innovation. We have a dev center which is mostly based in Dubai, a little bit of India as well, a little bit of mostly Dubai, where we basically have a somewhat of an open door policy through the regional ecosystem managers such as myself. If you've got an idea, if you've got some desire to kind of get involved with XDC, you come and see someone like myself in whatever region you're in, and we can sort of help you find a developer in Dubai mostly, who can then sort of like give you some guidance. We have a range of accelerator programs that are in place for of businesses that are much more ready to kind of go forwards in a scaling sort of situation or in a launch situation. Recently, we've had Foundership and Tenity and Brink, and there's another massive one from America coming soon. Essentially, we're all about facilitating collaboration. So again, as a regional manager, one of my jobs is to basically find people to work with each other, or who complement each other, whether it's a VC or a business manager, or a developer, or a regulator for that matter, or a peak professional body as well. So and just to tag on your second question on that, we have developer documentation from our XDC Dev Center. Again, that's mostly based in Dubai, but we have a very comprehensive website homepage, zinfin.org, which has a lot of good information and resources. There's some web resources for developers and builders out there who want to get sort of more into the SDKs, and there's all sorts of libraries available, and obviously there's the testnet for builders and developers, and any help needed to kind of run the RPC and all the rest of it. There's a strong community support for people who are looking to build, and obviously again, someone like myself can help marry people up who are building, who need a little bit of extra guidance. And of course, we just launched our DAO, so the XDC DAO, where there's an opportunity to put forward grants, and they get voted on by 3 levels of governance. There's the judiciary, there's People's House, and the group of governing masternodes as well. So there's some good channels there for builders and developers to kind of get invested into XDC network as a place, as a home to build. And I think that's pretty much covers. I mean, there's obviously ongoing webinars and workshops coming out of the XDC Dev Center. There's increasing desire to kind of create more dev centers throughout the different regions as well. So there's plenty of opportunities there for people who are curious and want to kind of either migrate their project onto XDC. I mean, it only takes something like a half an hour of fiddling around with the indexes apparently to get that migration complete. But yeah, there's plenty of interest for those who want to migrate or want to build and launch on XDC.
Yeah, and I can second that, because from my experience working with the XDC, I think there's a very strong and I would say mature community out there to help the future developers.
It doesn't surprise me, but it's nice to hear.
Yeah. All right. So looking ahead, Sean, what do you see as the future of Web3 landscape in Australia? How do you envision the role of XDC network in shaping up this future?
Well, I'd like to think that XDC is going to be part of that whole drive to adoption. So, we're talking about things like supply chain, healthcare, all these sorts of infrastructure issues which, have yet to be tackled meaningfully. And obviously that comes with some regulatory certainties as well to be able to execute those sorts of things. But that would be, my hope, that we can drive that sort of digital economy. AI is obviously going to be coming into the conversation fairly strongly as well going forwards. Other, things like decentralized physical infrastructure is getting a lot of attention as well. I'd like to think that we can, meet the compliance requirements, bring in sort of some of those, maybe, and also foster some emerging sort of tokenization, utilities that we may not have, thought of before. I'm just speaking recently with, data providers and data verifiers, and there's a very strong chance that we're going to be able to bring forward cultivate a tokenization of many different asset classes that are emerging. we want to empower developers to kind of, being a public and private network. We want to empower, that's the goal, or the promise of a public open source blockchain, is to be able to, have that autonomy and democratization of participation. So yeah, lots of bottom up sort of change and opportunity. I think that would be what I'd love to see coming through. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we all are looking forward to what's coming up next in this region. So thanks, Sean. Thanks for your time today. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners?
Uh, well, I like to emphasize the importance of community. And it's certainly with the emergence of our DAO, I think that's going to be a very strong part of that puzzle, fitting in quite nicely to really link in community to what is being built and what could be being built. We're committed to fueling the devs and the builders. So, if anyone in Australia, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, and the islands want to get in touch, just jump on my web on xdc.au. There's a contact form there. We are an EVM compatible ecosystem, so we're very much, working with Solidity, and we've got that fantastic private and public state. So we've got some really interesting, tricks to our, in our locker, really, I guess, to kind of really bring out some great innovation and industry and enterprise applications. So I just want to say thanks, Sharik, for the opportunity, and just know that XDC has got your back. If you're anyone out there who wants to build, we'll do everything what we can to kind of encourage, promote, and certainly create a platform for your success.
Yeah, that's awesome. And for our listeners, I think you are there on YouTube, you have presence on X. So I'll be sharing the details in the description in this video. So you guys can join and follow Sean's channel on YouTube. And so thanks, Sean. Thanks for your time today, and good luck for all those exciting projects ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sharik, and it's been a pleasure, and I look forward to catching up with you soon.